Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Empowered Pause. I am your host, Rachel Chinoa J. Welcome to Wednesday evening, April 19th. I hope everyone is actually doing well. Before we get started on today's topic, I just want to, as usual, give you a little information about Speak Initiative. SPEAK stands for Suicide Prevention Through Empowerment, Action, and Kindness. And it is through these three philosophies that we're offering peer support programming to people in our community who may be challenged with mental health illness or who have had past or current suicidal ideations. So, Speak Initiative is also looking for a guest for the Empowered Pause. So, if you know anyone or if you are interested in being a guest to be interviewed on the Empowered Pause to either share your experience with your mental health journey, any coping mechanisms or things that are now working for you, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so tonight I am going to share a couple of resources that came to me because I think they're really important at this point in time. A bit of transparency. A few days ago was the 1 year anniversary of a very good friend who passed away. And in the process of grief, we forget that sometimes it's not a linear journey. There are stages of grief, there are symptoms that come up, there are things that actually happen. But I want to give you some of the actual stages again, because I know we talked about grief almost a year ago. And I'm also going to give 8 coping mechanisms to help with grief, right? So there are 2 articles that I'm taking this information from, which I will put in the chat after this has aired. And feel free to comment, give any feedback that you may have. If you have resources that you'd like to share, by all means, share them as well. And we'll get into this conversation. So the first article I'm sharing is from verywellmind.com. And I'm just going to go through it. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'm just going to go through some of the important parts of it. So it's important to remember that the grieving process can be complex and it isn't the same for everyone. These steps may not be followed exactly, or other feelings may surface after you thought you were through the stages of grieving. Allowing room to experience grief in your own way can actually help you heal after loss. So, the 5 stages of grief are denial, we have anger, we have bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Now, of course, I can go through what each of these actually means, but I'm sure anyone who has experienced a loss understands what bargaining is, understands what that denial looks like, understands probably what the anger looks like, right? Some of us haven't experienced all of those stages yet, but they're bound to come up at one point in your life. If it's either a close relative who you've lost, it could be even just a relationship. It doesn't have to be a loss from death. It can actually just be a major loss in your life that we are grieving, right? So I am actually going to go over 8 coping mechanisms to heal from grief. And let me pull it up so I get everything clear. Hold on a second. Okay, so before we get into the coping mechanisms, I want to share a little bit of information because some people do not believe that grief can actually affect you physically, and it can. Grief can be considered an emotional state, but it can also affect your physical well-being. So, according to a review in 2019 investigating the overlap of brain circuitry in emotional and physical pain, experts found evidence that the intensity of these 2 experiences is very similar to the body. For example, telling someone to just get over it, a broken heart may a broken heart may be like telling someone to just get over a broken leg. At first, the immediate grief response can be similar to feeling sick. You may experience a loss of energy, body aches, headache, stomach upset, poor sleep. And as grief goes on, research shows that it can actually impact your body in specific ways, including heart attack and cardiovascular disease, depressed immune response, chronic sleep disturbance, increased stress hormones, appetite changes, cognitive impairment and memory decline, persistent negative thoughts, and suicidal ideation. Grief can contribute to the development of mental health challenges such as depression, anxiety, post traumatic stress disorder, and prolonged grief disorder. There's also um, information that states that in some cases, grief can cause the condition known as broken heart syndrome. And it's actually a type of cardiomyopathy that is well known. It's not exactly understood, but it is thought to result from the stress hormone surge that causes spasms in the heart's blood vessels. So it's a serious heart condition. It isn't always fatal, but if it's not found and treated properly, it can be fatal. So grief is not just an emotional experience. Your entire being is experiencing the loss, be it the loss of a loved one, the loss of that relationship, the loss of a fur baby, the loss of a community. You can grieve a lot of different ways and a lot of different things. So, coping mechanisms for grief. The biggest part of navigating grief is finding your own unique support tools and practices that work well with your life. Simon Koger, or Simone Koger, excuse me, is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a grief counselor from Washington State. She explains that loss involves a one-on-one connection, which is why managing grief can mean something different for everyone. It doesn't look the same for each one of us. We may process in very different ways. I actually know that I stay in the anger phase a little longer than I would like to, but I understand now that that's just a protective mechanism that I'm using so I don't have to feel all of the emotions at one time, right? So the first mechanism, coping mechanism, is symbolism. Koga suggests honoring your loss through symbolism, finding things that remind you of the person or pet you have lost to be reminders of the importance that they have in your life. Keepsakes and pictures of positive moments can help you recall feelings of joy. If your loss didn't involve death, reminders of positive outcomes could be helpful. If you lost a job, for example, a picture on the refrigerator of your dream job may inspire you to go back to school or may motivate you to follow your passion. Research also suggests that building shrines, such as creating murals and placing memorial items, at a site can be healing as you honor loved ones that have passed away. Memorials is the second coping mechanism, and that's another way of honoring a loss is to create a memorial. They can help alleviate your fears that loved ones might not be forgotten or might be forgotten by you or by others. For example, planting a tree as a living memorial. Other people have found benefits to physical reminders such as tattoos, certain forms of art, things of that nature can actually memorialize your loved ones. Sharing, which is something that I lean on the most, is basically to talk about special memories of them with others. Talk about the good times. It can be a way to revisit positive memories and temporarily interrupt the slew of negative emotions that you might feel after a loss. Sharing can also help you find support from your friends and family. It can be a reminder that you are not alone. Often, grief is something multiple people are experiencing at once, even though each process is individual. Dr. Gary Brown, who is a psychotherapist in Los Angeles, says that pain shared is pain halved. This is one of the keys to moving through grief. Keeping it in will likely prolong your suffering. If you can't talk about it, you can't process it. So reach out to family and friends who you know are supportive. Next point is keeping short-term goals. It can be natural to fall into the habit of isolation and withdrawal when you are experiencing grief. Dr. Brown states that it is easy to get caught up in withdrawing from life when you are ready. Make a to-do list every day. Having short-term goals can help you to not feel so overwhelmed. Small goals can actually help you focus. Instead of looking at everything you have to do in the day or what the future may hold, having a list can help you celebrate small accomplishments like eating breakfast. And before you know it, your list may get you through the entire day without feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Next is be kind to yourself. This relates to what we actually spoke about last week. Just be good to you. It's natural to experience grief. There's no wrong way to express emotions of loss. When people around you cannot relate to your experience, they may inadvertently make you feel guilty, embarrassed, or ashamed for feeling the way you do. It can be important to know what you are feeling is natural. Accept whatever thoughts and feelings you are having, with the exception of self harm or harm to others, simply means that you are a normal person, having normal but understandably upsetting reactions to the loss of a loved one. One way to be kind to yourself is through self care. Eating right, focusing on healthy sleep habits, and remaining active can help your body and mind when you're healing from grief. Next, we actually have allowing grief. While staying active can help you work through grief, um, there's caution, bear caution against not allowing yourself time to actually grieve. Make sure you take breaks. Some people try to work literally through grief, which is a type of avoidance. Hold space for your grief. Next, we have journaling, and that's just expressing your emotions. Someone else isn't always easy or possible to talk to in those moments, and it may feel overwhelming when you say these things out loud. So journaling offers a way for you to express your grief without fear of judgment, right? How you journal as an individual um, can be part of your grieving process. And you may write down one word emotions, for example. You may find that descriptive imagery is helpful for you. Um, Sometimes writing a letter to a person is helpful if you've lost a loved one. And sometimes you may have regret of not having said something that can weigh heavily on your mind when you lose someone close to you. And writing that letter or writing it or journaling it could be helpful, right? And our last suggestion is letting yourself cry. And it seems like it's so basic and so automatic, but a lot of us don't like to cry. We don't want to cry. We don't want to feel the feels, and we get overwhelmed. I am sometimes that person. I'm talking about myself, right? But I know that crying is very therapeutic because tears release oxytocin, excuse me, and endorphins, which relieve physical and psychological pain and helps calm your body. So weeping is not a weak process. It's something that we actually have to do. Our bodies need that in order to sometimes gain equilibrium and calm ourselves down, right? So weeping is also had mood stabilizing properties related to an emotional release. So feel the feels and let yourself cry. I will put these articles in the messages or in the chat once this is over, but I wanted to offer these tools to you as I'm using them myself. I was aware, or I am aware, that since 2020 and the pandemic happened, there's been a lot of loss and a lot of transition in a lot of our lives. And I don't think there's an easy fix to grief, but I know that it doesn't have to hurt this bad forever. So if you're in that place, or if you find any of this information helpful, I offer it freely. We hope that this has been a great experience. I hope that this has been informative. And again, Speak Initiative is looking for guests. So if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Speak Initiative on the Empowered Pause to be interviewed about your mental health journey, please feel free to comment. Feel free to drop in our DMs or in the messenger. We are on all social media platforms. Please do not forget to follow us below. And until next time, take